We've talked a lot about fidelity so far. Our first three strands, reflective practice, dyadic relational, and emotional process, those are process fidelity. Trauma framework fidelity is really highlighting that how are we holding history and experience. And procedural fidelity, those are the things that we're doing at each phase. Now, content fidelity is different. Content fidelity refers to the goals of treatment and whether what the therapist is doing is connected to the CPP goals. Now, what's really important is that the therapist has conceptualized the specific goals that they're targeting as they're thinking about the needs of each family. And if we go back to the CPP triangle, we know that we've learned that what is the child's history and how is it connected to their functioning. And then the bottom of the CPP triangle is where we're going to put the goals. How will treatment help? What will we focus on? Our goals are tailored for each family, depending on the path that they've traveled before they met us, where they are now, the challenges in their environmental context, and where the family would like to go. Our stance is that every family's pathway in treatment is guided by CPP goals and objectives. Treatment goals evolve in response to incremental growth. We hold hope and we're mindful of change. We also appreciate that change in treatment goals is not linear. Here's a metaphor that will help us hold the goals of CPP. Building a treatment is a lot like building a house. You want to start with a solid foundation. Let's think about the goals that we would put in a solid foundation. At the center, what you'll see is hope, because nothing happens without hope. We might also think about the need to enhance actual safety, because it would be hard to process what you've been through if you're not actually safe. We want to strengthen family relationships, we want to develop an empathic therapeutic relationship, and we want to think about the other providers and how we're working together, so we want to coordinate care. Structurally, we want to think about the walls. What we've included in the walls as our treatment goals are supporting typical development. That's actually one of our overarching goals, is to support the child in returning to a typical developmental trajectory for that child. We want to support the caregiver in understanding the meaning of the child's behavior. We're strengthening dyadic affect regulation and body-based regulation, and we're also supporting the child's relationship with other caregivers, at least the way that they hold them in mind. In the roof, we've put many of our trauma goals. These include normalizing the traumatic response, acknowledging the impact of trauma, helping the child and family to differentiate between then and now, and putting the trauma in perspective. So we've organized the goals in this way. But we want to make sure that you don't think of them as do this, build the foundation, then the walls, and then the roof. Because what you'll notice is that during the foundational phase, we're already talking about the family's experience of trauma. So we're up there in the roof. And one of the ways that I hold this is I think that any good architect knows what their house looks like even as they're building it. So as we're building this house with the family, we're thinking about the roof, and we're thinking about what they've been through, and we're thinking about how that affects what happened underneath. So this is meant to be more of a holistic rather than a step-by-step metaphor model. Let's think about how the house model might actually be helpful from an agency perspective. As we start to work with families, we'll recognize that some of the families that we work with have a lot of work that needs to be done in the basement, in the foundation, or in the structure. And then we'll recognize that there are other families where that's actually been built. The families trust us, there's a fair amount of hope, they have good relationships, they've been through something, but they're not as shaky down there. And so we can start to think of families very roughly as this family is going to need some structural work, this family, it's really more on the walls, and then there may be families where actually the caregiver has a very good understanding of the child and their behavior. They already have some understanding of how the trauma may have impacted them. And what we'll see is we're really addressing the goals that are in the roof. Now, the reason this is important is that clinicians are more prone to burnout when you get an entire caseload of families that need structural work. So even as we're thinking about caseloads, we might want to think about, is it possible to get clinicians a mix of cases where it's really more in the roof, the goals are in the roof, and the foundation's been built? Or if not, if they're really getting caseloads of cases that have a lot of structural foundational issues, how will we provide them with more reflective support? How might we alter their caseloads? How might we give them more reflective supervision?